Good evening, I'm Patrick Hayes, and this is the Redeeming Life Ministries Church in Stanton, Virginia. This is our Wednesday night Bible class. We've been reading through the ideas of the 12 wisdoms in Proverbs chapter 1. Verse 5 has a section in that verse that says, "A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels," or to counselorship in wisdom. The word there, wise counsels or counselorship, is the Hebrew word takbulah. This is the 12th of these strange Hebrew words we've been learning from this passage in these first 5 verses of Proverbs. I call them the 12 wisdoms. And this one means becoming a wise counselor. Solomon is talking in the story that I've penned to a sailor who has come to the end of his career. Started off as just a worker for Solomon's Navy, then rose up to the rank of the Admiralty over a period of some decades. He is now called Commander Shammah is his name, and he's making his 12th and final speech about the 12 wisdoms before a collection of royal visitors from different nations who are at Solomon's table for an annual international conference. We read in the Bible that the kings of the earth and their people came to Solomon to hear his wisdom. So that's been going on for a while. This is the last one. King Solomon speaks, "Now, Commander Shammah, bring us to the final chapter of your story. Illustrate for us wisdom's last and dearest daughter, Takbulah." Shammah ben Puah bows. He turns for the 12th time to face the table. "Your Majesty and noble fellows, I too am an aged man now. I these days seldom leave my home. Below my house lies an inlet opening to a grand view of the sea stretching beyond. I keep a small boat bouncing at the end of a pier. In fair weather, I love to sail it into the wide bay. My friends these days caution me not to go out unaccompanied, so I take my grandson out with me, sometimes with one or two of his young friends. Recently, while tacking slowly out of my little lagoon, the boat caught bay wind and smooth sailing. We went slapping neatly over gentle rolls and happy whitecaps. My grandson was at the tiller taking my orders. I and his little friend kept the single sail trimmed. It was a fine day, and we sailed twice across the bay. We neared the harbor mouth just before the bottom drops off and the open sea begins. I lowered the sail and dropped our anchor stone. I took out the food basket. While we ate, I talked to the boys of my earlier days out on the great seas, the storms, the long weeks of voyage, the strange island ports. They listened and gazed out to where the waves roiled high and crashed against the reefs. Beyond, the sea throbbed with huge moving swells and deep plunging troughs. A 2-masted ship was passing in the distance, rising high and clear, then dropping out of sight. Then again atop another mound of water. Its crew leaned out over the thwarts under the filled tight sails. Its hull drove hard, its sailcloth stretched. The boys marveled to see it disappear fully under a swell, then to watch its mast top peek over, slicing along mysteriously, then the whole ship rising to view again neatly atop a long crest. "Grandfather, let's go out there too, can we?" "Not in this little boat." "Why not, Grandfather? You said it's a fine ship." Well, this is a fine ship for two small boys and an old man on this easy bay. But we have no deep keel for high seas. Those rollers would take us over. Why doesn't a little boat have a deep keel, grandfather? I looked at the boy standing, clinging to the narrow spruce mast with one hand, peering out under the the flat of his other hand, and out at the bright ship. His little friend rising to stand beside him to gaze also at the knifing vessel built for deep sea travel. Where are they going, grandfather? I wish I were with them. They're standing out for the islands, I think. I know them. They'll be gone for months. They built their ship especially for speed. Can we build one, grandfather? I'll help you. I almost answered, but did not. I watched the boy watching the sea with his friend, turning now to me with his eyes big and with the kind of hungry wonder I remembered having when I first decided as a young man that I wanted to make a ship my wandering home. I grinned at him and said nothing. I dropped the rudder and beckoned to the little friend to take the tiller. I motioned to my grandson to weigh anchor and hoist the sail. I let the boom swing around, and we found wind for a straight course back to my lagoon. I still had not said a word halfway across the bay when my grandson turned from the bow and smiled again with his eyes wide and knowing. We are going to build it, aren't we, grandfather? Yes, son, we shall. You shall, and all the boys in the village, if they wish to help. Get them together. Tell them we're going to build a ship. We'll show them how it's done. I began to sing softly the old shanty from my former days. A music I had not felt for years carried me along into the old energy. Brother, if you'll go to Psalm 107, verse 23. They who go down to the sea in ships, who do business in great waters, these see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. 23 and 24 is what I read, and that's fine. This is the only psalm in the book of Psalms that mentions a sea voyage. And it goes on for several verses about a storm coming up at sea. People wonder who wrote it. I insist it must have been King Solomon, because no other king of Israel, no other psalmist of Israel ever had anything to do with seafaring. So our sailor is singing that old song softly as he takes the boys back across the bay. That night, while the boy and I stood at the table where, spread out under the glow of my old lamp, I unrolled the scheme for a sleek two-masted sloop with a high stern transom and a long rudder, a boomed sail on the aft mast and a double sail on the fore, a long bow, pointing a high sprit for two jibs. It had two little decks and a tiny cabin with 4 storages. I had drawn up the plans long ago. I knew them by heart, having pored over them under my lamp 100 times. But I had never found the time, the energy to build it until now. The boy had questions about every detail. Already he had sponged from me the skill of tacking in crosswinds, of keeping the narrow keel under and the sails tight in a plunging side wave, of making quick turns with a swinging boom and a shifting sail on running sheets, of throwing the jibs aside for new wind. He had it all in his mind, just as though he had done it in actuality. When it was time for bed, my grandson took a scroll from my shelf. Can I read this in bed tonight, grandfather? You may, but don't stay up too late. We have much to do early. What is it? It's this book of maps, the islands. I want us to sail to them when we finish building our sloop. We shall, shan't we, grandfather? We shall indeed, boy. Now off to bed. Grandfather? Yes. May I borrow your lamp to read with? I just want to read the way you read. I'll bring it up to you and show you how to trim it. I know how. Let me take it. All right. I prepared myself for sleep. I peeked into the boy's room. He was asleep. The scroll on his stomach was opened to a long map out over the blanket. The lamp was still burning on the night table. I blew it out, but decided to leave it there for him to find in the morning. I did not want him to think I had taken it from him. But no, I also wanted it myself to read a little tonight. I slipped my finger into its little brass handle and lifted it, but I paused again and set it back. It should be his now. The old sailor statesman bows to the room. He turns to bow once more to the king. He walks to the back of the hall and takes a seat past the rear of the table. The guests are all quiet. Solomon rises. Thank you, gentlemen and lady, for indulging me to present my dear commander's stories today. I believe them to be memorable for us all. This last one, for me, is the most precious. He pauses to wipe his eyes. For here we have the transference, the impartation of a man's love and his joy to a young son, a young boy, a grandson, the next generation of a man's offspring. Solomon pauses again. He must dry his eyes, and he turns from the group to do it. It is awkward. No one in the group looks to another. Priest Zadok coughs and blows his nose into a handkerchief. No one looks at him. Solomon straightens and turns to them. It is a rare thing, rarer than you might think. It's this, God's greatest blessing, that a man might receive in the days of his life a mere vapor under the sun, to have one's children's children take of his wisdom and his joy, and to receive it, to want it from him. There is no proven wisdom in a man's life unless it results in this. For what is a man? What is he? Unless he can see the end of his wisdom begun in the lives of his children or in his children's children. He stands with his fist clenched, not defiant, not angered, but somehow frustrated, not now regarding the group. Go with me, Jeremy, to Ecclesiastes 2:21. All else is vanity. I tell you, a man may labor. Let's read it in the King James, and then I'll read it in my own paraphrasings. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity. Yet to a man that has not labored in those things, therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil. Solomon's thinking of himself, of course. He's worked all his life in these ideas, and now he's got no one to leave his wisdoms to. More on that later. Here's my version of it. A man may labor in Hokmah, in Da'ath, and in Meshar, yet he must leave it all to a man who has not so labored, who will not labor in them. This is vanity and great evil. He lowers his eyes to the group. He smiles and nods to them, relaxing his hand. He raises it, fingers spread as if to brush away a fly. So we come at last to my strange word, takbulah. Yes, it is a strange word, isn't it? Most Israelites don't much use it. Some of you priests don't even know it, do you? No, for it isn't found in Moses. It's rarer than the law. Even my father David never used it in his songs. I found it only once in the dialogues of Job, where Elihu speaks of the water cycle of the earth, Job 37:12. It is turned around by God's takbulah. Job 30, by his counsels. The word there is takbulah. People don't know this word, takbulah. They hear it in my Proverbs and they ask me of it. I've tried to explain it, but I've never articulated its meaning better than our commander has today, although he did not utter the word. But he knows it. Sailors use it. It is a mariner's term, takbulah. It's the ship's lore that an old salt teaches to a young sailor, knowing the ropes, teaching the ropes, the passing on of skills, knowledge, discipline, ethics, sound judgment, insight, expertise to a younger mind. This is takbulah. It is steersmanship, good guidance, sound advice, wise counsels, but not merely as taught out, but as received in. There's the rare thing. Received in. Wanted. Desired. The sailor's marvelous skill at maneuvering his craft, even in contrary winds, navigating through complex matters of life. It draws upon Chokhmah, Mutsar, Bina, and all the other wisdom, but now finds the ultimate skill, the knack to impart those subtleties to another. I want you to go to Proverbs 18:1 to be able to pass it on to another. Here's a proverb that's quite often misinterpreted, I think, but I have Solomon quoting it. Through desire, a man, having separated himself, seeks and intermeddles with all wisdom. I've looked it up in several verses. Is this a bad man or a good man? Through desire, a man separates himself and seeks and meddles with all wisdom. Is this an unsavory person? Or is it an extremely wise person who seeks solitude so that he's got a desire to learn wisdom? And so he separates himself from the customary ideas, and he goes and seeks and looks. By the word intermeddles means he goes down to the deeper meanings of proverbs and scriptures, all questioning all wisdoms. Solomon goes on in my story, for takbulah cannot be held in one person, in a teacher alone. No, it takes two people to hold it. The teacher and the student together, the imparter and the receiver. No counselor has takbulah, no matter how wise he might be, if he has no disciple. For this reason, I place takbulah at the last of my list. All of the virtues, Chokhmah and her maidens, as I say, come at last to vanity if there is no pupil, no listener, no apprentice willing to learn, also endued by God with the spirit of wisdom. Takbulah is the agreement, the relationship, the covenant, and the tension between master and apprentice. The master with no apprentice, what is he more than a fool? He has words only. They're mere noises if no one hears and heeds them. Worse, he's a musician with no instrument. His wisdom is but a song unsung, and with no dancer to embody it. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't have a dance without a dancer. You can't have a dancer without a dance. What's the point of written music that'll never be played? What's the point of a skill to play an instrument and never touch that instrument? What's the point of having wisdom if there's no one to impart it to? I want you to turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 9, beginning with verse 13. And we'll go verse by verse through this. I once heard an Arabian story that continues to unsettle me. As I grow older, daily nearing the end of my time, this story haunts my musings more and more. I have also seen this under the sun, and it is an important lesson. It seems great to me. Next verse. There was a little city, and few men within it. And there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in this little city a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city from the siege. Yet no man remembered that same poor wise man. Next verse. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the young man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Now, why does Solomon tell this story in Proverbs? I'm going to retell it in my own rewriting of this same story. There was once a small walled city with few defenders. A powerful king brought his forces to conquer it. He beleaguered it and set siege works against it. Now there was in the city a poor wise man. Due to his counsels, the city was liberated. Yet afterwards, the poor wise man who had saved them was utterly forgotten by his fellow citizens. When I recall this story, Solomon says, I think, although wisdom is better than strength, the poor man's wisdom is unremembered, and his words are no longer heeded. Yes, the poor man's wisdom became neglected, and his words were no longer heard. He died unacknowledged. Worse, his wisdom died with him in that place. It was, as you said, king, says a young priest. It was, of course, because the man was poor. No one remembers a man who has no wealth. I have also seen. No, says the king, I think it wasn't that he was poor in wealth only. Although you are correct to note how people instinctively listen better to the rich than to the poor. And surely such was the case in this little city. But had he been a man of wealth, they would have honored his memory, but they still might not have retained his wisdom. For he was poor in another sense. Despite his wisdom, his evident orma, mesima, and sakal, he had no takbulah. He had developed no disciple who would hear him daily. No young man who would carry his wisdom into the next generation of the city. Oh, the city elders heard him once during the crisis, and they eagerly took up the strategy he proposed and were successful in it, though they gave him no credit for it afterward and forgot him altogether. And there were many among them who claimed to have thought of it themselves. But not one soul of the place sat to hear him daily. And whose fault was that? Not theirs, I think, for people are simply what they are. They heed whoever speaks with the loudest voice, the most oft-repeated voice. It's to be expected of them. No, it was the fault of the wise man himself that he was unremembered. His wisdom neglected, his words forgotten. For he did not seek out and find a group of young men to instill in them the eager lekha to hear him regularly. No school, no impartation. If takbulah does not happen, if the old sailor has no little grandson and his little friends who are excited to learn the old lore, to build the new boat, if that isn't passed on, then the great wisdom is in vain. Thank you very much. Excuse me, folks, for sniffling while I'm talking to you. And why does the story haunt me so? Oh, Solomon closes his mouth and blinks his eyes and shakes his head. Someone says, "Do you fear, O king, that you are unheeded by us? I can assure you, your wisdom will endure for 1,000 generations. We are your disciples. We shall take your counsel into our hearts and our deeds and teach it to our children. Do not imagine, O king, that you are to be like the poor wise man of the Arabian story. You will never be unremembered. Your what is the strange word? Takbula. Your takbula is well established among us, your listeners." Solomon regards the man blankly. He looks around the room. Now Solomon is thinking these next words to himself in kind of a stream of consciousness. "I see not one person, except perhaps my recent acquaintance, this woman ruler of distant Sheba, who has, other than her, no one has ever really heard me. Not even she. Certainly none of the others, though, would be here if not for the repute of my wealth. Not one of them has come for my words alone. Not one Israelite present at this table would be here today, but for the hope of procuring some position or for the fear of losing one. Not one of these foreign visitors, except perhaps she, the Queen of Sheba, would have answered my invitation to come here, but for the advantage their kings think to gain by spying out our strengths and weaknesses. And not even my son has offered or even thought to come as the prince of the realm and to sit in on this conference." Solomon is seized by a sudden terrible feeling of terrific loneliness. He blinks his eyes again. Old priest Zadok moves upon this quiet moment. Without standing, he raises a finger. My king, as for this word takbula, it does appear, as you've said, only once in the older writings, in Elihu's speech to Job. Let's show them this verse, Jeremy. This is Job 37, verses 9 through 13. And I've got Zadok quoting this. This is Elihu talking to Job. Out of the south comes the whirlwind, and cold out of the north. By the breath of God frost is given, and by the breath of the waters it is straightened. Also by watering he wearieth the thick cloud. He scattereth his bright cloud. And it is turned round about by his takbula. That's the word used in the Hebrew version of Job. That they may do whatsoever he commands them upon the face of the world in the earth. Solomon goes on talking. God, you see, God steers the winds, clouds, and waters through takbula. Men may witness God's skill in maneuvering powerful elements, but will they learn from him such subtleties? Will men learn delicacy in operating the powers bequeathed to them? Will they even wish to, my king? This is Zadok still talking. Solomon nods to the priest. Yes, I well know the passage, priest Zadok. Elihu goes on to challenge whether Job claims to have God's takbula. Now verses 14 through 18, Jeremy. Hearken to this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Can you know when God disposed them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? Can you know the balancings of the clouds, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge? How does he quieten the earth by the south wind? Have you with him spread out the sky? Solomon is still talking, this time to Zadok. Immediately after this speech, as Jehovah himself, not Job, replies, or Job who replies, speaking out of the or God who speaks, not Job who replies, speaking out of the very whirlwind that Elihu has just mentioned. God speaks out not to Elihu but to Job, signifying how he and Job indeed have a takbulah between them. God then asks even more questions than Elihu has posed. Job is the only learner now who really ponders these questions. Yes, I've taken note of Elihu's surprising and foreign word takbulah, and I've written Proverbs 1:5, we already looked at it, that a man of Bina may attain unto takbulah. I answer you, High Priest Zadok, I hope it is true that men may reach the level of understanding to pass on to new generations the lessons of the past, the hard lessons, so that each generation won't have to learn again the hard way, repeating the same old mistakes and errors, learning again by failures, reinventing over and over again the same things. I hope that we might attain to an answer of Elihu's question, the balancing of wondrous works and perfect knowledge. But I fear it is not to be. I fear that we all, as a large people, will never learn. We continue to hear God's words, His laws, and apply them only as we see fit to our immediate wishes, without seeing His larger meaning and His far-reaching design. We may advance in some levels of wisdom, yet never attain to takbulah. I wrote again, and this is Proverbs 11:14, where there is no takbulah, the people fall, for their safety must rely upon a multitude of counselors. Now, Solomon only uses the word takbulah a couple of times in his Proverbs. This is one of them, where there is no takbulah. Now let me talk just a minute. I'm going to quit reading what I think Solomon would have said. This is Pat talking now. Where there's no counsel. It's more than just our idea of counsel. It is a person who has something to say. He's got a group with him, and there's a group that are willing to ask the questions and probe the subtleties and sophistications of the ideas, and willing to hold to those things and then pass them on to a next generation. But if you don't have a generation that really wants to be your students, even before we began this class, there's a young man here I really love, but I heard him explaining to somebody, I won't mention your name on tape, but I heard him explaining to somebody why he didn't really care to listen to a certain teacher teach, and I thought it's interesting he's saying that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Because the teacher, the professor, didn't act like he was really interested in teaching it. No takbulah passed along, just enough information to get by on an exam. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about catching something from God and then passing that same thing on to others that will continue acting on it, and then to another generation, something continuing that's extremely valuable. Not stuff you can read from a book, memorizations of dates and places and geometries, but something about bringing a large people, an entire congregation or a town, like the little city in Solomon's Arabian parable we just read, or even a whole nation, or even a whole group of nations which Solomon is desperately trying to reach. If he can only find people who will come to him wanting takbulah. Solomon goes on talking to these folks. I hope I'm being somewhat interesting to you tonight. There's the whole history of man, the failing or falling of a whole people for lack of takbulah. Oh, there's always the unheeded wise man, and perhaps another elsewhere, and yet another. But a few wise men form no multitude of counselors, no majority. The prophet and the sage stand isolated, both from each other and from the general community. But they must commune to form a large consensus if they are to bequeath true wisdom to a large group and to a next generation. Yet among the young these days, I observe no great desire to receive wisdom, even if such a bequeathal were in place for them. This is the vanity, the curse. The young are doomed to repeat all mistakes. They'll have to learn from the start again the things that might have been imparted to them. Each generation is bound to have to begin anew on the same hard road. They do not heed me. What about you, Priest Zadok? Do the young heed you? Priest Zadok just stares at the king and makes no response. No, you think not? To whom then do the young take heed? But there is a pact they form, a takbulah of sorts, an agreement they make with other teachers. To those teachers they become most willing pupils. And who are those other teachers? Wicked, base, and sinful exemplars of vice, violence, and defiance. The wise and truthful are ignored, while liars and fools enjoy a takbulah with the young and the simple. Let's look at another passage here that I've got Solomon quoting. Proverbs 12:5. The thoughts of the righteous are right, but the takbulah of the wicked is deceit. There is our doom, the perpetual and continuing doom of all people, of the whole of humanity. Weeds and thorns flourish everywhere without cultivation. Yet beneficial, life-giving plants must be cared for, nourished, coaxed, protected, and defended, watered, and fertilized daily. It is God's doom pronouncement upon Adam. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In sorrow you will eat. It will bring forth thorns and thistles to you, and you will eat only the herb of the field. You, Adam, will eat your bread in the sweat of your face until you return to the ground. And God isn't talking about agriculture. It is his parable to Adam, about Adam, a proverb for the accursed condition of the entire human race. Do you not understand what I'm saying? Adam himself is the accursed ground. You, Adam, were taken out of the ground. Dust you are, and to dust you will return. Thorns and thistles. This is all humanity can produce of itself from one generation to another, unless we till the ground in the sweat of our face to bring forth the sweet herb. But even then, even as we work at it, our poor strength and knowledge, the dust pulls at us, pulls us down to it, reclaiming us as its own, calling us irresistibly into it again, to make us part of its curse and to multiply from us again and again the thorns and thistles that are its free thriving, while it persists in reluctance to give freely any herb worth the harvesting. In every generation, as with every agricultural season, the soil must be retilled, replenished, or the thorns will take it over. The earth is in constant takbulah with thorns and thistles. But takbulah with good growth, wheat or barley, it must be maintained with hard work. Solomon's monologue, though impassioned, has sparked no response from his hearers. They do not even seem to get his meaning. He speaks, Priest Zadok knows, in real reference to his son, Rehoboam. The Queen of Sheba knows this too. So does Zadok. If any others guess it, they show no sign whatsoever, not even of interest in this last talk. It has become late for them, an exceptionally long class. They secretly wish that no one should ask any further questions. They only hope by this time to be fed and dismissed. For the most part, they by now do not even wonder why the king is so moved by the old seaman's last talk about his grandson and the boat, nor do they deeply care. But to their dismay, the scribe Jehoshaphat rises to speak. He receives the king's nod. My king, I notice that you twice again write the word takbulah in concerns of war. This is Proverbs 20:18. Every purpose you write is established by counsel, and with takbulah, war is planned. And again you write, and this is Proverbs 24:6. By takbulah you will make war, and the multitude of counselors will win peace. I note also, my king, that these two sayings are the only ones of your Proverbs in which you mention war. There's another, says King Solomon sadly. I said again, and this is Proverbs 21:31. The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. That makes 3 times I mention war in all of my Proverbs. 2 of those times I warn that takbulah must be involved. But do not, scribe Jehoshaphat, make my written words to say what I do not intend. I mean only that if there are no heeded counselors, if we fail to achieve accords to produce peace, if we don't find the safety of the Lord through the promulgation of wisdom, then the only takbulah left to us will be in the counsels of conflict and in the advices of war-seeking generals. But I tell you that war is the first resort of fools. Thus, as you rightly note, I make very few mentions of war in my writings and speeches. And I know what you may think, that it wasn't so with my father, King David. Well, that is true to an extent. Many of his psalms do appear to those who delight in combat, to call for war, to celebrate it. But those who think so did not really know my father. He, King David, wanted peace only and ultimately. He was a shepherd from his youth. It was all he wanted ever, to again bring his flock to idyllic green fields running with cool streams, to lull them to quiet temper with his soft songs. But battle was forced upon him even in this. The bear, the lion, the wolf, the jackal, he fought. Oh, yes, he fought, but only so that he might return to the peace of his flocks. And it was in this that he gained his undeserved reputation, not for shepherding, but for fighting. Yet, says Jehoshaphat, your father sang of war. He glorified God for making him a victorious warrior. His own words, my king. And let's look at Psalm 144:1. Blessed be the Lord, my strength, who teaches my hands to fight and teaches my fingers to fight, to warfare. And then let's look at, almost through with these, let's look at Psalm 147, David's prayer. Oh God, you have girded me with strength and for battle. You have subdued under me those who rose up against me. Oh God, oh Lord, strength of my salvation, you have covered my head in the day of battle. Did I give you the wrong one? Let's see, maybe I misplaced my footnotes. Was that Psalm 140? No, 140 verse 7. I see what you did. Yea, Jehoshaphat goes on. King Solomon, your father David, even said, as did Moses and Judge Deborah, that God himself is the great God of war. This is from Psalm 24, verse 8. That God is the great God of war. Who is this King of glory? He is the Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. What is this then, O King Solomon, if not a celebration of the very art of war, taught by God in his martial Takbulah, learned by the valiant and commemorated in honorable victory by David's own poetry? Surely your father David relished the fight. O King Solomon, your father David lauded the man who fought with him. He praised the mighty 37 who distinguished themselves in battle by his side, memorializing them as chieftains. Yes, says Solomon to the whole company, and one of those 37 is yet with us, though he has remained silent throughout these discussions. He knew my father as well as any man, better than you, young priest, better than you, O priest, high priest Zadok, could ever have known him. This man knows him. Solomon lifts his hand to an unnoticed figure seated in the shadow of a pillar against a wall. Lord Benaiah of the host, may I call upon you to bear me witness? They all turn to look. None have guessed who he is, nor have paid him any mind. Throughout the conference he has sat unmoving, his head swathed in a hooded cloak. It slips away now as he slowly rises. They strain to see the famous old warrior. He remains in the shadow. I am here, my king. The voice is edged, keen, scraping, the syllables terse. Step forward, O warrior. We speak of David, your king. I'm not going to read you much more, just an introduction to who this figure is going to be. The step is labored. The frame, most know, was once huge. It is now age shrunken. The body seems, as he moves, forced forward by an ancient will. It is the will, some know, that has forced it each day since his birth, forced through childhood and youth and manhood, through both victory and anguish. He is an old, strong oak, going brittle, and few know, bereft of much of his former vigor, yet still standing, defiantly alive, the last of the famous 37. The face comes into a shaft of shallow, slanted evening light. It is battle-scarred, battered by nearly 70 years of rough service. The head is crowned with sparse, close-cropped white hair. The skin draws taut against the hard old skull. The dark eyes are tired but expert. Few see him in person these days. He is seldom in public. Few, yet now, at the mention of the old soldier's name, place names resonate in Judean minds. Ziklag, Keilah, Adullam, Ziph, Zion of Jebus, Rabbah, the Valley of Salt, Damascus, Benaiah, Ben Jehoiada, the slayer of lions and of giants, captain among David's mighty men, the executor, the commander of Cherethites and Pelethites, the high commander of all the host of Solomon, the legend. Benaiah advances along the wall past the rows of men who sit at his left. He makes his way toward the front. He halts, standing before Solomon. My king. That is going to be the last chapter of this that we're going to read, continuing to talk about the takbulah of peace that Solomon talked about and the takbulah of warfare. And are they the same? Well, thank you for your attention tonight and for simply being here. God bless you. Brother James, you got anything you want to add? Oh, well, you're like Solomon's last audience after he went on that long rant and then asked if anybody, and I know.
Let me change the word add to comments.
Yeah, okay.
So it seen.
I'm joking with you, of course. I know that's not you.